We got a new angle, people. Hey guys, it's Reagan and today I am bringing you a review for the book Soundless by Richelle Mead. Now Soundless is the Perusetopia book club pick of the month of December and we are working with Penguin Random House this month. Soundless was an interesting book for me going in because I had some of my own expectations just based on the plot that really appealed to me, but I had heard pretty mixed things. Overall of the book, I would say I really enjoyed it because I appreciated a lot of the cultural backstory, and that cultural backstory was definitely my favorite part, and of course I will go more into that as I delve into my review right now. Quick reminder though, we are doing a spoiler discussion of this book on January 1st at 7 o'clock Eastern, so if you want our spoiler thoughts, tune in there for more info. So the novel Soundless is a standalone fantasy novel that is greatly inspired by Chinese folklore. It follows our main character Faye, and she lives on top of a very rocky mountain that is very isolated. They get all their food in an exchange system. Basically, their village is rich with natural resources. They mine basically gold and they send it down to the ground, and then the ground people send up a zip line of food to feed her village. Another unique aspect of her village is that everyone living there is actually deaf. So they communicate with sign language, they communicate visually. This mode of communication has of course been working for them for a very long time, but now there's new issues arising in the village. Everyone is starting to slowly go blind, which of course is a huge issue when you communicate visually. So of course Faye is dealing with this huge problem. Her village is seemingly dying of starvation because they're unable to produce enough gold to get enough food. And when seemingly things are without hope at all, Faye actually regains her hearing, which kind of sends her on a very interesting journey down to the lands below as she tries to save her people. Now the strongest elements of this book that I personally really enjoyed is the Chinese folklore element. For me, this story was very plot driven and read just like a tale. I am a history major, it's one of my degrees, and it just felt like one of the many stories I've read in history classes. It felt very reminiscent of real Chinese folklore, so I really appreciated Richelle Mead for really keeping true to this style of writing, which I personally really enjoyed. Another thing about this book I really enjoyed, culturally speaking, is her obvious research that was done going into this novel. She makes a lot of cultural references, not directly, but clearly she's very familiar with Confucianism that would be heavily dictating social interactions during this time between different aged people, people within a family, people with different social classes. It ruled ancient Chinese civilization, even Japanese civilizations, truly, for a very long time, and it's important and it's interesting to read about. It's different than Western interaction in a lot of way, which I think is what we encounter a lot in novels. So it's just very interesting to see a story that's clearly very inspired by Eastern history and Eastern perspective that we just don't see very often in YA at all. So I greatly appreciated this novel for its historical and cultural perspective that it gave people, honestly. I just thought it was really fun. Plot overall, I've already kind of mentioned, I thought it was pretty linear. It didn't really necessarily have some major plot twists that kind of astounded me or surprised me. That being said though, I enjoyed the whole ride through. I found it to be very interesting. I liked learning as Faye did, as she kind of discovers the mystery of her village, the mystery of the land below. I was always intrigued to figure out what was happening next. I would say the weakest part of this novel is probably the character development because it was so plot developed or driven. The characters, though interesting, I didn't necessarily have any emotional connection to them. Faye was probably my favorite character, which is kind of a given seeing as how she is the main character, but any other character in the novel I just didn't necessarily have any emotional attachment to. Additionally, there was actually a romance in here, and again, it just wasn't a romance that I was driven to care about that much, but it was still interesting. It was still an interesting part of the story. I just didn't have any sort of emotional connection. That being said, I really did like this book because I found it to be very unique. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so to me that is an above average rating, and honestly I enjoyed it for what it was. So like I said, I really like this. If you're interested in Chinese folklore or standalone fantasy or any of the things I mentioned in this book interest you, I feel like you would like it. I feel like it's such a short and easy read. It's just a taste, and it's a fun little tale that I ultimately quite enjoyed. So, yes. But because the month of December is actually not just Soundless, it's actually Richelle Mead month, we're also talking about Richelle Mead's newest novel that is coming out in April, The Glittering Court. This novel I am so pumped for. It is another fantasy series, not a standalone like Soundless, and it has a very interesting mix of historical influences. It's inspired by both the Elizabethan historical time period and also frontier worlds. It follows our main character Adelaide as she escapes the Elizabethan era world that she comes from. She escapes an arranged marriage because she doesn't want to marry the guy. She runs away to the New World and joins something called the Glittering Court, which is a place where women are trained for marriage, though I'm pretty sure there's a lot more to it than that. This novel is full of dresses and politics and all sorts of things I personally really love in a book, so I am very pumped for this. And again, this comes out in April. Alrighty guys, that is my review of the novel Soundless and my mention of The Glittering Court. Let me know down below if you've read Soundless and your thoughts on it, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!